Hi everybody and welcome back to the Anything Club, our podcast where we talk about, you guessed it, anything. So today we wanted to talk about the process of getting a job here in the UK. It's probably not going to be UK specific, but just the process of getting a job and everything you have to do. And yeah, just our experiences and all things like that.
The trials and tribulations of moving into a new career when maybe that's not what you've been trained in, and getting out of, you'll hear us talk about this, but getting out of a box that you seem to be put in a lot of the time when you're trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Which we'll explain more in this episode. But so what is your experience? Is your experience with getting jobs and the process positive or negative?
Overall, it's been quite positive.
Is that just because you've got the jobs, or is that because the process has been not easy? Because I don't think it should be easy, but the process has been nice and smooth.
I think I've had a mixture, to be honest. I've had some roles where the process has been really long-winded, but it's had a successful outcome. I've had other roles where the process has been really simple and it's been an unsuccessful outcome. So I think it's really mixed.
I think it's hard when you've had a really, really long process and then you don't get the job. When it's really, really long, it's hard, it's, you know, you've had to prepare so much for this interview. And then you do the interview, you think it went all right, and then they call you up and they say, oh, we really liked you, but, you know, basically we like someone else more. That's kind of annoying. But like you said, there's also interviews that have been super easy that you don't get and you're kind of surprised about it. But
yeah, I think that in the past, and I didn't live in the past, so I can't really comment, but like when our parents were probably first searching for their first jobs, or our grandparents, I get the idea that it was a case of knowing somebody and going to speak to them in person and asking them to take you on, rather than what it is nowadays. It seems so competitive nowadays that companies are having to put 1,000,001 like walls in the way for you to get over before you move on to the next stage.
yeah.
Whereas before it was like who you knew and who you spoke to, and it's not like that at all now. I mean, you can get referred and you can get your foot in the door, but there is always, well, there always seems to be somewhat of a recruitment process, of an application process.
Well, it's the same with everything. Even when you're in a job now, there's processes for everything. There's not just, oh yeah, we like this person that has come into our office and, you know, given us their CV. It's a whole thing. They have to be recruiting. They have to have a specific job open for that person. They have to have everything set in stone. Like the salary needs to be already worked out in their heads. And I feel like back, like you were saying, when our parents and grandparents were getting jobs, it would have just been a chat. It would have been, oh, I wonder if they're hiring. I'll nip in there and have a chat with the manager and build a rapport with them and then see if they've got any jobs going. But I just don't feel like that would happen now. Maybe in like coffee shops and things, but
there's
not
industries,
in proper, you know, careers.
Well, yeah, I think it depends on the industry. But when I was first sort of looking for work experience in my first sort of job, they were, you know, retail jobs, customer service based jobs, you know, the typical jobs that you would first do. And some of them were just a case of an online application where you attach your CV and your cover letter and then you'd go to an interview. Some of them, there was some online testing and some, I remember, I won't name the company, but I'm pretty sure you had a job here as well where you had to do like an online...
Yeah.
So questions would pop up on the screen, you'd have to record your answer. It was a bit odd. But over time, I've noticed that the process has gradually got more and more intense. It's probably because I'm going for better jobs, but even so.
I guess the higher paid the job you're going for, the more intense the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember I went for a job that, you know, wasn't paying that much, but the process was long. It was just like, is this really worth how much I'm going to be earning? Probably not. And in this particular interview process, there was like you had to have a chat. You had to go in to have a chat with the, the centre manager or whatever. And then they would have to refer you upwards to their managers. And then you'd have to come in for a tour of the place. And then it would be another meeting with a manager. But prior to all of that, you would have done like a test to it's like a scenario test, like to respond to how you would deal with this scenario. And then you'd have to have handed in your CV, which also needs to be tailored to every single job, and a cover letter. It just seems like the process is just relentless.
Yeah.
Especially when you really need a job and it's every single application is taking that long.
I was going to say, like, you could just think, oh, well, write yourself a good CV and just submit it to loads of different jobs, but it's not that easy because, yeah, like you said, you have to tailor. If they want a CV, you have to tailor it. Then you have to write a cover letter that, you know, you can't really just use a standard cover letter. Again, it needs to be tailored. You can probably have a standard template, but you need to tailor it. So there is a couple of hours worth of work. And then often you will do that and you probably should look first, but you'll go to their online application process and they won't want a CV or a cover letter. They will ask you questions that then you need to write basically essays for. I've had experience of jobs where I've had to write over 1,000 words per question, and it's been absolutely insane. You know, because you often have the experience required for the jobs, otherwise you probably wouldn't apply for them in most cases, but you always have to prove it. You have to prove it at the stage of the written application. And then there might be a couple of other stages where you have to prove it. And obviously when you have an interview, most likely they'll ask you about your experience and how that then fits into the role that they're advertising. And again, you have to prove yourself. And it's hard not to think that, you know, just give me a trial shift, give me a trial week.
I'll show you that I can do it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult. I'll talk through a couple of experiences that I've had. So I've had one application where it's been it's been a lot of different stages. So there's the stage of the CV / cover letter. You often have to have recruiter calls for quite big companies that have a lot of applicants. So, I mean, you know, that's a very informal chat with a recruiter at the company or an external recruiter that just basically want to know if you'd be a good fit.
Filter you out, really.
Yeah, they're really not too intense is what I found. They're quite pleasant experiences in most cases. I've had to do online testing, so online maths testing, online
aptitude tests,
personality tests, scenario tests, and they're quite intense often, actually. I found that some of them are really quite difficult, and I've heard that they're able to filter out like 70% of people, which is pretty mad.
But also unfair. I feel like,
yeah.
Obviously I understand that there needs to be a cut off somewhere. You can't just accept everyone. Yeah. There has to be some way of filtering people out. But these tests, like one of the ones that you've had in the past, it's been crazy. Like you're under a time constraint. The questions you have hardly any time to ask the questions. They're really difficult. And it's like, God, if my brain isn't wired in a way to answer these particular types of questions, which when we were looking at the practice tests, my brain was not wired for these questions at all. Yours more so.
But like the maths ones and
yeah, just things that my brain just can't cope with that, and especially under time pressures. So if that was me doing that, I probably would have failed that test and not even got a chance, even though I would probably be good at the job.
Yeah.
And it's sad that it would filter a lot of good people out, probably.
They're meant to be unbiased testing. You know, it's meant to be a metric that can filter out people in an unbiased fashion, but of course nothing really comes without.
Not everyone's the same, and not everyone has the same strengths. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay. And then, you know, quite often you can have multiple interview stages, not just like one interview. Sometimes you can go through like 5 stages of interviews whereby they're sort of kicking people out at each stage. Like a telephone interview, they might get rid of 10%, then they might have a video chat and they might get rid of another 10%, and it just keeps going. And by this point, you've probably put in hours upon hours, but more so, it's been going over months often.
Because it's a long process.
Months and months. And then you get to the end and you might get some nice feedback, but told that they don't want you, and then you kind of have to start again, and you have to tailor your CV, and it can be, I think getting them knockbacks can be really difficult. And I don't know how to say this without sounding big-headed. I've never applied for a job and had an interview and not been successful up until this year. So, you know, I didn't think I was anything special. Like, I knew it was going to come. I knew I was going to get turned down. But I didn't really understand how that would feel. And although I wouldn't say it made me feel insecure or like I can't do the job. What it did make me do is realise just how hard it is to pick yourself up and apply for another job, knowing that you've just been told no and again and again and again. It's a bit relentless, honestly.
Yeah, I had the same problem with that relentless feeling like you can't imagine getting that call and being told, yes, you've got the job. That happened to me when I was applying to be a teacher at all these different schools. I'd just fresh out of uni, just been qualified. All my friends were getting jobs left, right and centre, and I felt like I was one of the only ones that hadn't got a job yet, and it was demoralising.
Yeah. Wonder what you did wrong.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the fact that I was necessarily a worse teacher than them or anything else like that, but it was just the jobs that I was going for and the schools that I was going for, the people that I was up against, just happened to work out like that. But I must have gone for about 8 or 9 interviews in schools and just kept getting turned.
And were they all the same sort of process?
Yeah, so the processes was the same. So it was plan a lesson, go to the school and teach that lesson, and then you have a panel interview.
What about before the planning the lesson? Did you do a CV or?
You don't have to do a CV, but you do have to apply on the council website for the school. So I can't remember if it was like an online application
Something
form,
like that, though,
or whether it was definitely a cover letter. But anyway, it was a process, and not only did you have to teach this lesson, but you had to spend hours planning it, making resources, and it wasn't a lesson that you could recycle for the next interview because their specific their requirements for the lesson you had to teach was so specific. It would be teach a year 2 class maths, and it has to be the topic of subtraction. So if I had planned that lesson, and then the next interview would be you have to teach history, the Tudors.
Yeah.
That's not going to be recyclable. So it was a lot of effort, and it was really hard to keep getting knocked back. Eventually I got one of the jobs, which was great, but that was after a grueling process of being rejected.
Yeah, I think since having faced some job application rejections, which has actually, I think, been very good for me, because somehow I managed 25 years of life with not a single job application rejection.
It's impressive.
I don't know how I did that. But I think it's been good for me because it sort of taught me that resilience and how not to pin all of your hopes on one thing and realise that it is what it is. Try your best. If you don't get it, it wasn't for you.
Everything happens for a reason if you believe in that.
But true, yeah.
If you believe in that, I believe in that. Everything happens for a reason. So if you don't get that job, then another job will come that you'll prefer, or maybe you were going to hate that job that you were about to get, and that worked out.
What do you think about the actual interviews? So, like, have you had any really good experiences, some really negative experiences of actually, like, face-to-face or video call interviews?
I haven't had any terrible experiences, really. I do remember once, this isn't during the interview, but I remember once coming out of an interview for a school and getting the rejection call, and then telling me within, sometimes at the same day, sometimes the day after, and then them telling me, oh, we didn't pick you because you were too nervous. And I remember thinking, I didn't feel that nervous, because by this point, this was like my 7th interview, so I wasn't that nervous, and it was just like, another interview. And I didn't feel like I was coming across like that. And then they said to me, you were too nervous, so we didn't give you the job. And I thought that was a bit of a harsh, I don't know, it's an interview. You're going to be anxious, you're going to be nervous, you're probably not going to be performing your best as you would if you were in the job, if you know what I mean.
It's just another one of these ways to filter people
exactly out. So I ended up thinking, well, I don't agree with the fact that I was too nervous.
You were probably nervous at the beginning ones, but like you said, if this was your 7th.
But then you end up thinking, like, okay, they needed something to tell me, because they can't just say, oh, we don't like you, so you're not getting it. They're not going to say that, so they need to think of something constructive to say. But I felt like that was a bit unfair, because I don't feel like telling someone that you were too nervous is constructive at all, because that's not going to change anything. I'm not going to be like, oh, okay, then I won't be nervous in the next interview. It doesn't work like that. So that was the only negative taste I've had in my mouth from any interview, really, apart from the ones I've just
But what about actual questions that you received? Is it all quite similar?
Yeah, they're always, tell me about a time where you've shown this. Tell me about a time where you've done this.
What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you want this role? Why this company?
Why this company? Why this role? They're all very standard.
Yeah. I've not really had much that deviates from that. I've had experience of very technical questions.
That you weren't expecting.
Yeah, sometimes that wasn't expecting. Very specific technical questions that you'd probably only know if you've done that job before. But other than that, yeah, they've all been tell me about a time, or what would you do if?
I don't know if I was doing an interview and it was my company and I was having to interview people, I don't know if I'd go down that route. Would you?
No.
Would you go down the route of tell me about a time where you demonstrated something?
No, I would be trying to find the same things out, but I wouldn't ask in that way. I would go down the route of talking. I would want it to be more of an informal chat, because I've always found that I get the most out of an interview and they get the most out of me when it's more informal. So I would go down the route of, hi Hayley, my name's blah blah blah, I'm going to be chatting to you today about this role at this company. Let me just start by just telling you a little bit about my experience in the company, what the company's all about, and we can just have a little chat. And then at that point, I would probably not ask a direct question as such, but maybe just be like, oh, I didn't know if you knew this about the company, but is there anything else that you've maybe researched about the company that you're particularly interested in? And just open up that dialogue, basically asking, why do you want a job at this company? Then I'd move into the role. And I think it's often a good thing if you're talking to someone that has experience or has had experience in that role. So again, you can open a dialogue about what a day-to-day day in the life of that position looks like. What do you need to have? But it would be more of a conversation like, oh, in this role, I don't know, there is a lot of emails that you'd have to send. Is that something you'd feel comfortable in? Have you done that before? It wouldn't be, tell me about a time that you've shown communication. Like, do you know what I mean? It would be more of a...
The problem with those questions as well, tell me about a time you've shown communication, for example. I feel like, how am I meant to think of one example? Like, in every job that you're working with customers or you're communicating with anybody, you're doing it all day, every day. Like, how are you meant to think of one really great example without,
Again, it's a way of showing who's prepared for that interview and who's put in the time and who can articulate themselves in a way that they would want to represent them as a company in articulating what they need to their clients.
Yeah, I can see why they do it. I just think
there's better ways.
There's better ways of doing it, and I agree with you. It would be really good to just have a chat and open a dialogue, and instead of saying, "Tell me about a time that you've done this," just by saying, "Yeah, there's a lot of communicating with external stakeholders in this job. Is this something you've done before?" Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. If they say, "Yeah, I've done that before," yeah, well, tell me about it. How did you find it? Like, what did you do on the day-to-day basis? It's about getting to know what they have experience in and whether that would fit with the company. And more so, in my opinion, getting to know the person.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Because you've got to work with them and they've got to work at your company. And
quite often it's the hiring manager, so the team's manager that's interviewing you, and they've got to, mentor you, really.
Exactly. You need to be working with somebody that you're going to get along with. And it's not just the employer's opinion of you. It's just as important for you to have a good opinion of them as an employer, because you don't want to be working for somebody that you're going to not get along with, or a company you don't agree with their values, or you're just going to leave after a month.
Well, I've had 2 or 3 interviews whereby either during the interview or when I've gotten feedback, they have directly said to me, in other words, we are hiring you because we like you and we think you'd be a good fit for your team. You don't necessarily have all the experience, but we are aware that we can train you and we like you, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention as well, like what we said at the beginning of this podcast about being put in a box.
Okay.
This is something that I think you've struggled with more so than me recently, but I've also struggled with it in the past.
Are you talking about like career changes?
Hold on a minute. Yeah. So being put in a box that really restricts you to job roles that you've done before.
Right.
If you know what I mean. So I know that I've been put in the box of, anything that's customer service related. That seems to be the only jobs that I feel like you get given a chance in. Because I've had so much experience working with customers, so much experience, customer service, anything that involves other people, members of the public, the general public. And
I suppose teaching's that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's people. You're like talking to people. And so if I ever try and go for a job that's more admin-y based, or it's more technical and it's away from the general public, you're not dealing directly with people, they always say to you, oh, I think you'd be better suited in a customer role. And then you end up thinking, oh, I'm trying to get out of that. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult to get out of that box that they keep putting you in. Like, have you had experience with that?
Yeah, I think as well it's if a recruiter or a hiring manager or whatever is looking to tick boxes on what past experiences you've had, and maybe you haven't had a technical experience, you've had customer service, they are more likely to sort of push you in the direction of that department in their company, because they just don't really know how to handle your application, I suppose.
It's hard, isn't it? Because you've applied for this job because you want to go into that job. You haven't applied for a technical role for a specific, I don't know, a program or something that you want to be working with. You haven't applied for that hoping that they're going to put you in a customer service role. Otherwise you would have applied for a customer service role.
Yeah.
I just feel like sometimes you don't get given a chance.
Yeah, I think in that instance, I think you either need to be quite relentless and just keep applying,
and it'll work eventually,
or you need to get into a company and move sideways once you're in, because I think that's a little bit easier. Like if you move into a company in the finance department, if you move into a company in the marketing department and you decide that finance and the accounting department is something you're really interested in and you're working towards qualifications in your own time, you can talk to the people in that team, you can shadow them, you can say, look, I'm really interested in moving over when there's a job, blah, blah, blah. You might have to take a hit to your salary and all of that, but I think it's easier doing it that way around.
Yeah. It's a shame though when you've worked your way up salary wise, you've worked yourself to a good salary in a customer service role, and then you decide, right, I'm going to try and move away from customer service. I'm going to try and do something, that's working indirectly with customers. You're just not speaking to them directly. And then you've either got to move over to a different company and work your way up, or change roles, whatever you said. Or you've got to start at a much lower salary because you don't have the experience. And that's fair enough, you don't have the experience, but it's so hard when you want to change direction just slightly. And then you've got to go right back to the bottom again.
I think you can negotiate your salary to an extent if you're changing industries, if there are overlapping qualities, I suppose, between the two roles. There's always going to be organisation, all that. Project management might overlap, but yeah, sometimes you do need to be willing to take a right hit.
Yeah, there's also been roles that I've applied for that, people online or people you speak to have said, yeah, try and negotiate the salary because you've got experience doing most of these things that they want you to have. Like, you shouldn't be starting right at the bottom. And you hear success stories of people saying, yeah, I negotiated my salary. I got $3,000 more than they were offering, or $3,000 more than the minimum because I've got this, because I've got that. So you go into a job thinking, yeah, I'll negotiate. And I'm not too confident at doing that. And I don't know, I feel like maybe this is stereotypical, but I feel like as a woman, it's harder.
I was going to say, my experience talking to colleagues that I've had in the past and what I've read online, it's the truth that men typically can negotiate their salaries higher and are better at it. Yeah, and it's a confidence thing, I think.
Whenever I've tried to even remotely negotiate my salary, I just get met with no.
Really?
I get met with no, you'll be starting on the minimum. And there's no discussion to be had. It's no, you'd be on the minimum. Even in a job, like, let's just say hypothetically, I've worked in all these shops, all these retail shops. I've got loads of experience working with customers in retail shops. You start at another shop because you've changed, or you start somewhere where you'll also be working with members of the public, and you say, I'd really like to start on a higher salary than the minimum because I've got all this experience. I've literally got everything that you need me to have. I just haven't worked in this particular shop. And you're told, oh no, you start from the bottom and you work your way up. So after a year, you'll get to go up to this or whatever. And it's just a bit of a kick in the teeth because you think, how much experience do I have to be able to get this higher salary that I deserve?
I think in cases like that, you've got to be ready to walk away and say thank you for the offer, but no, thank you, I'm worth more.
Yeah, I would like to know how to properly and effectively negotiate a salary because I do think it's hard. I think it's really hard.
I think you've really got to have a specific salary in mind, and you've got to have evidence as to why you should not be paid less than that. And you've
got to be willing not to accept anything less.
You've got to be willing to walk away because if you're not, well, you're in their hands, aren't you, really?
Yeah, and they can do what they want then, really, can't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I think this is kind of unrelated. Well, it's not unrelated, but it's related to the application process. Don't you hate it when you've written a CV and you've got your CV ready, and then you go to apply for this job, and then they want you to input all of the information from your CV into their system,
but in a different way.
So it's like, tell us about your employment history, and it's all on my CV. It's all on my CV.
But they want
Everything's
you to
there.
write what's it called?
They want you to write a list of everything you've done,
or they want you to take the list on your CV and put it into a continuous.
Yeah, and you've got to change all the format, and it just takes hours when you could just upload your CV. Anyway, that was just something that I just find really irritating when they do that. And that's happened so many times.
What else is there as part of the... I don't know. I see pros and cons to most of the different application processes.
There must be pros, because that's why they do it. And it must work, and they must find people like that. I just think there's other ways outside the realms of this traditional employment process.
Yeah, I mean, when I went for my... when I was at university and I did a year in industry, that was intense. That application was intense. I don't remember much prior to the actual interview, but I had an interview over the phone. I think I had a video one, and then I had to go to the location where the company was, stay over the night and go through a whole day of interview processes. And it was panel interviews, it was presentations, it was talking to members of staff like in a formal way, like you're being watched, everything, having lunch with them, everything you did during that day was
watched.
was scrutinized in one sense. And then all the managers would basically hand pick out of hundreds of people who they wanted on their team. So like months into it, like you would hear your manager say, oh, you know, this person also wanted you on their team, but I got you. And it was very, like, it was an eye-opener, because until that experience, I hadn't had anything that was corporate as such. It was all very shop-based, I guess.
Well, that's what you do when you're younger, don't you? You work in coffee shops, you work in little retail outlets and restaurants and things like that. Obviously, people do that when they're older as well, but... That's sort of where you start.
What was your job application for when you were waiting, bar staff?
When I was a bartender, it was... See, that was actually good, this one. It was just hand in your CV. I handed it in person, I think, because they had a thingy outside, and I just handed it in. And then I got a phone call just saying, oh, do you want to come in for a chat? I went in, I had a chat with them. I had a chat with the manager just at a table. He did ask the questions like, tell me about time you've dealt with an angry customer or whatever. But that was all expected. And then I had that evening, I had to come back to do a 2-hour trial shift. But at that point, I'm pretty sure I had the job. He just wanted to check that I wasn't completely terrible. And he taught me how to pour a pint and all that stuff. And that was it.
It
was really easy. Yeah, and that was when I was at uni at the same time. So it was ideal. I only had to work 1 or 2 days a week. It was really easy to get, actually, that job. And I feel like so it should be sort of thing. If you're going to do a job like that, there's unsociable hours. It's not necessarily, for me, it wasn't the most fun thing that I could have been doing with my life, because I didn't enjoy the atmosphere that much, and with all the drunk people, and I just didn't enjoy that. And I didn't realise I would enjoy it until I started. But I feel like it should be a relatively easy process for a job like that, because the pay wasn't great either.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're going to be working for basically nothing, you don't want to have to have...
I'm just tired.
You don't want to have to have applied and had a relentless scrolling process, because that's just disheartening, I think. But that's a story for another day. But yeah, I don't think I've got anything else to say in terms of the recruitment process. We're probably getting on half an hour now.
Let's have a look, shall we?
Oh
yeah, bang on.
Yeah, nearly half an hour. So, yeah, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that, it can be tough out there. But I think, again, there's an argument that jobs are becoming more readily available right now after everyone leaving their jobs during lockdown, us being one of them. And I think that there are a lot of jobs out there, but there is also so much competition, and it can make applying for jobs feel like you're never going to get anywhere. But I think you've literally just got to keep going. I think it's one of those things.
It's a full-time job in itself, just applying for the jobs.
And I think whilst you're applying for jobs, work on other stuff that could potentially become an income source for you in the meantime.
Definitely.
Unless obviously you've got your heart set on one particular industry, then I guess.
And unless you've got, you're very specific. You've qualified in a very, very specific area, and you know that's, there's only a few jobs around that are going to be in that area. Well,
if you're noticing that you're getting turned down and you're getting feedback and it's the same sort of thing again and again, let's say that you're going for a software programmer job, and you can program, but you can't program in Python. You can't code in Python. And that's just the one that you can't do out of like 4 or 5 that you can. And every job is saying, oh, we use a lot of this, so we can't really, take you on.
The path is clear from this point.
Learn Python.
Learn
And so sometimes it's a little bit more obvious. But like with you, with the confidence thing, that can be a little bit hit or miss, really.
That's more like something I would just have to work on over time. But
the only feedback I've literally ever got is either, I've been turned down for 2 jobs. One has been, you were great, we really liked you, but someone else had more experience.
Can we keep you in mind for a different role?
Yeah, there was no feedback other than someone else was just slightly more experienced. And the second one was, we are recruiting someone else that was more experienced. So literally the same thing, just said differently. So I can't really comment on the feedback, but I would always ask for feedback for sure.
It's important, isn't it? Anyway, but that's a different story.
Right. What questions do you have for anyone today?
The question
it's normally me that asks.
Okay, the question I have is, in your life, however old you are, what percentage of jobs that you've applied for have you been turned down from? And the reason I ask what percentage and, can give a rough figure is because you might apply for a job and get it, but then you leave that job. Then you're applying for another job very quickly afterwards. So you've probably applied for quite a few jobs in your life. Right. Because I've probably been turned down from about 50% of the jobs that I've applied for. Because I haven't tended to work in the same job for that long. Right. So I've applied for quite a few. So I'd say about 50%. Okay. So what percentage of jobs have you been turned down for in your lifetime?
Yeah, let us know. Okay, cool. Let's also leave a comment if you want a particular topic covered in the podcast. We have a list of ones that we're working through that we want to talk about, but obviously it's not us watching this back, it's you guys. So if you have anything you want us to talk about, literally anything, let us know. Within reason, of course. I don't really want to talk about like
cheese for half an hour.
Actually,
I probably could talk about
cheese for half an hour. I probably could not. Anyway, right. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in to us blabbling. I always say this wrong.
I know. Maybe you should stop saying that word.
Yeah, talking again. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.